being here. My name is Kenzie Ross, and I am both an educator in the arts, and also a mindfulness teacher, meditation teacher. So today we're focusing on mindfulness meditation, and we have 1 hour together. I'm going to start with a short welcome. I want to ask you guys to put one or two things in the chat, or even come off mute if you're more comfortable, but chat is totally fine. And then I'll be offering a short guided meditation, whether you have any experience at all or zero or tons, all good. It'll be like a classic, great entry point, or if you already have meditation experience, it's just a good reminder. And then I'll give a little context for what we did, a little talk. When you're on meditation retreats, they call it a Dharma talk. Dharma is like the whole world of Buddhism specifically, but it also covers a lot of different spiritual vantage points. So, not that we're bringing in much of that to today's class, but just so that if I say words that maybe aren't as well known, I'll describe where they come from. And then I'd love to leave time to have discussion, to talk with you guys about how this lands for you, or just questions you might have about what we did, about mindfulness, about where to take this next, if you're interested, or if you just have any more personal questions for me and some of the other practices I've been a part of. Um, so briefly, I started meditating about 9 years ago. I lived in Manhattan for, have been living in Manhattan for about 10 years. And I kind of stumbled into meditating through being an actor and really fell in love with it. And it led to wanting to go on like a 3 day retreat, not too far from the city. And then that led to wanting to study with an actual teacher and read books. And it kind of just tumbled forward um, slowly over the years. And then more recently, I've been going on longer retreats and studying more closely with an actual training program and a teacher. But for myself personally, I used to struggle a lot with anxiety, sometimes panic attacks, or just simply confusion about what I was doing in my life that would then result in um, a lack of happiness, of direction, or knowing what I was doing and why. From hindsight, I think now I understand that. And when I started meditating, there was just something about it that felt good at first. And then I watched it slowly help my life and change my life in all these ways of having awareness around what was happening for me and what I was choosing and what I wasn't choosing. Um, so that's a tiny bit of my backstory. And what I would love to hear from you in the chat is your name. I can see your name, but if you want to add anything like pronouns or a preferred name, and where you are. I think a lot of you are in the Chicago area, if I'm understanding that right. But if you want to share location wise where you are, um, and anything you want to share about what brings you here today. If there's a specific curiosity, or it could be vague, it could be personal, whatever you're comfortable sharing. And the last thing, I'll put all this in the chat so you don't have to remember 4 things, is taking a moment to notice one thing that you're noticing in your physical or emotional experience. So that could be that you feel warm or cool, you have a neck pain, uh, that you're tired, sad, anything you're specifically aware of in your physical, emotional experience. So let me put this in the chat for you briefly. And if anyone's brave and wants to come off mute to do yours, you can raise your hand and I'll bring you off mute. While you guys are typing or thinking, I can do mine live. So I use she, her pronouns. The name is Kenzie again. I'm currently in Madison, Wisconsin, and I am here because I'm starting to teach meditation and mindfulness, and I'm really passionate about it and find it fruitful to talk about with anyone. And I'm aware of being a little chilly, like my hands feel cold, so I'm wearing my sweater. So we're going to jump right in with a guided meditation because I want to have some context for everything else we're going to talk about today. So just before we go into the guidance, I'd first like to suggest if there's anything you could do that would make yourself more comfortable, to feel free to do that. So if you're needing to shift how you're sitting, or like you need a pillow behind your back, or you're chilly and you want something around your shoulders, or maybe a sip of water, we'll only be doing this for about 10 minutes or less, but I just want to give you a quick moment if anyone's needing to do anything that would make yourself more comfortable physically, um, to go ahead and do that so we can really drop in and feel present for about a 10-minute guided meditation. And if there's anyone who has just joined us and wants to catch up, we'll have time for discussion at the end if you have any questions on anything you've missed. But we just did a brief intro, and now we're going to do a guided meditation practice, and then I'll talk a bit more about what mindfulness is and why we want it and why it's great. Okay, we've got Olive from New York wants to de-stress. I hear that. Yeah. Great, great. It looks like Cindy might have gone to make themselves more comfortable. All right. So the first thing is to find a comfortable seated position. So there can be a lot of ideas in meditation that you have to be in some kind of fancy, like lotus pose. Not at all. You want to feel comfortable, relaxed, but alert. So you don't want to feel so relaxed that you are laying down and you might fall asleep, or like curled up in a couch in a way that your body might get tingly. But a simple seated position where you feel upright, not kind of contracting the body, um, and a comfortable position you can hold without needing to shift and move too much for about 10 minutes. And I will make it very clear when it's time to return back to engaging. So the first thing that is often really helpful is closing your eyes. Once you feel physically comfortable in the seated position, taking a moment to close your eyes. And not everyone closes their eyes all the way, but this is just an option to close one of the sense doors that might be distracting. So for this 10-minute sit, there's nothing else to look at. You don't need to be observing anything or engaging with anything in the visual field. And next, I want to invite you to take 3 deep breaths, maybe the biggest breaths you've taken today. And then letting the breath just fall in and out on its own, not needing to control the breath. But what we are going to do is bring our attention to the breath. So there's 3 ways you can do this, and you can really pick. It doesn't really matter. You might notice the airflow entering and exiting the nostrils, keeping the mouth mostly closed. Try out what that feels like. Usually there's a sense of coolness as the air enters the body. You might notice awareness more present at the rise and fall of the chest, or the rise and fall of the belly, the abdomen. So just take a moment and find to you where the breath is the most prominent. And if it all feels the same, just pick one. And begin to notice the sensations in the body while you're breathing. So we're choosing to have our attention with the breath repeatedly. Noticing any sensations as you're breathing in and as you're breathing out. And often when we begin to do this, we notice some places in the body there might be tightness, like around the eyes. Can you relax around the eyebrows, the eyes? Perhaps your hands are fidgeting or clenching. Can you just let the hands relax into your lap or down by your side? For me, sometimes it's around the jaw, feeling my mouth is closed tightly, and just a relaxed jaw, relaxed tongue. Sometimes I don't even notice my toes are curling for no reason. There's nothing wrong with any of this, but as we're really just letting breath move through the body, you give yourself the gift of letting those pockets of tension just release for right now. Returning to the in breath and the out breath. And if the mind wanders toward a future plan or a past memory or a judgment of what we're doing, just letting that go, interrupting it even, and just returning to the breath. So we're not looking to get rid of anything like thinking or tension, but we can decide to give our full attention to the breath, just for right now. And the breath can get really interesting. You might notice where an in breath turns to an out breath. again and again, you might notice the mind wander, start chatting with you about something, worry about something, plan a new activity. It's so okay. That's what the mind does. We can just say, not right now, and come back to the breath. Again, you might notice new pockets of tension or new places the body wants to fidget. Again, just allowing a sense of release, sense of melting a bit more into the chair. Trusting that the ground will hold you. And return to the breath. And the last thing I'm going to offer, and then be quiet for a moment before we end, is if being with the sensations is difficult, you can add a simple mental note of breathing in as you breathe in and saying breathing out as you breathe out. Just gently, lightly, very subtle. So it's something to stay with if the physical experience isn't as connected for you. As we come to a close, maybe just taking a moment to look around the room you're in before coming back to Zoom can help the system reorient. Or maybe you need a little stretch in the body. Okay. And whenever you're ready, you can come back on video. Yeah, lovely. Awesome. So my first question would just be a simple dropping in the chat again of anything you notice now in the physical and or emotional realm. You just kind of drop like a little testing strip into the inner world that makes up your psycho emotional physical realm. What's changed or what's just here now? Maybe very little, maybe not. Debbie said calmer. Laylee is feeling more present. Amina much more relaxed. Drew much more aware of my mental state. Hafsa more relaxed. Lovely. Lovely, lovely. These are great. And I also just want to name it's okay if not. Sometimes closing our eyes and going in, it's like, oh, there's a bunch of anxiety here. There's a bunch of sadness here. So even if what's present isn't cozy or relaxing, that's also totally normal and fine. So just if anyone's watching the recording back, I want to name that illumination of what's here is what we're curious about rather than trying to force a calm experience or force a relaxed one. Yeah, and Lexia said, feeling more aware of my body. That's awesome. Such a win. So I have a question for everyone, and you can raise your hand if you feel comfortable to vocalize this. Could take one or two responses, and you're also always welcome to put it in the chat, and I'll read it aloud. What is mindfulness? So when you hear that word, we hear it a lot more lately, which is cool. But there's a lot of different ways we can relate to this or think of this, um, whether you've had previous experience or just what's your sense of it to yourself? Like, how would you define or explain this to a child or an alien? What is mindfulness to you? What do you think of if I ask that? You're more than welcome to come off mute if you want to share.
Well, I guess I'll say something. Mindfulness,
Thank
to
you.
me, is being present. Um, just seeing the bad and good, anything in between, just being in the moment and not positive or negative. So,
Thank you so much, Drew. Yeah, being in the present with whatever's arising is what I'm hearing, good, bad, neutral. Um, yeah, being able to stay with, remain in the experience of what's really here. Gorgeous. Absolutely. In the chat, we have being more aware of your body and your mind, totally mindful of what's going on with this very tangible thing. Awareness of mental and physical states, totally. Yeah, great. Great, guys. Being aware of your environment and your individual self. Yeah, lovely. Love all these additions. It's like they all weave together to a really good definition because the more we're aware of our own patterns, needs, states, the more I think we can also then be aware of what's going on in a space with others or just the natural world. Yeah, we're more responsive. This leads to more compassion. This leads to more wisdom. So we can take actions toward the things we care about rather than being kind of like lost in the confusion or the hamster wheel of modern society's pressures. Yeah, we can find that pause to be able to have agency, right? So I'll offer a couple additions as well. You guys are already really saying everything. When I Googled it, I was just like, oh, I'm curious what the sort of Webster dictionary definition of mindfulness would be. And it said being in the present moment without judgment, which has been said basically. And I really like that last addition of without judgment, right? Because being in the present or being really aware of what we're doing, sometimes we can do that when we're doing something cruel, right? Or like really, really focused on accomplishing something that doesn't feel good to our heart or our values, but we're focused because we're it's urgent that we get it done for someone else's sake, or because we feel some kind of external pressure, um, or because we're really angry and impulsive, and so we're like really focused on trying to like get back at somebody, right? So we can be connected and present and aware of what's going on, but if we're not aware of the flavor of the judgments or the reason or the why or the intention behind what's going on and what we're doing, then we can still end up creating harm in the world. So there's a quote I'm forgetting from who's like kind of I think an ancient monastic person who's saying essentially it takes a lot of mindfulness to be a sniper, right? So mindfulness alone is one thing. It takes a lot of mindfulness to, yeah, like being a marksman, essentially. You have to like really be able to concentrate. So we don't just want to be able to concentrate. We want the mindfulness of what creates more compassion, what leads to positive outcomes, what do we want to put our energy toward. So without mindfulness, sometimes we don't even realize that we're moving in ways or we're creating dynamics, making choices, leading our lives, whether that's what we're doing all day or what we decide to watch or eat or who we decide to engage with, just off kind of an autopilot, right? So this being in the present moment, but also, yeah, with a loving awareness or without the negative judgments. A teacher on one of the retreats I sat reframed this as a momentum of loving awareness. So staying with, like I love what Drew said, being able to stay with the present, whether it's a good or bad thing or kind of a blah, boring thing. And then I would add that kind awareness or loving awareness or compassionate awareness too. It's like the decision to be present and as much as we are able to bring a kind and gentle mindset. Um, there's another teacher who used to just drop in all the time. Now it's like this. So she would just say, now it's like this. Now it's like this. Um, and I love that too as a really simple one that you can actually carry with you, like when you leave here tonight or are in your regular life in the next few days, just moments throughout the day where you kind of drop that test strip of now it's like this and feel what it's like. So that sense of um, can I really feel and let it like marinate when I feel happy or when I feel clear or when I feel calm and relaxed. Like, oh, now it's like this. And when there's a bunch of anxiety or fear or confusion or anger or sadness, now it's like this. What happens over time, the more we do that, the more we realize how much it changes too. There's kind of a freedom in that. Like, oh, it won't always be like this. It really won't. It will change. It has changed many, many times. Um, yeah, thank you for all these. I'm just going to check the chat once more as I've been looking at my notes if anyone added anything else. One more says actively knowing yourself and your needs, body and mind. Love this too. Yeah, absolutely. Because mindfulness can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, right? So we might be mindful of like, oh, I feel fidgety, and then the more you meditate, you're able to notice these more subtle parts of self that then affect your whole life and your relationships. And it's not to be this isn't to become obsessed with ourselves, right? Or have meditation mean like the world revolves around me and I'm just going to sit down and be like, how do I feel and what's going on with me all the time? It's actually a softening around identity and a strong sense of self over time. It's a very gradual process, but consistent meditation then leads to a less tight sense of me, and actually more of like an open hand of like, oh, I'm a part of this big web. I'm a part of nature. And knowing what's happening here and how to care for this one only affects more of an ability to want to be able to have healthy and appropriate responses for others, humans, animals, plants, everyone. Yeah. Oh, so cool. Thank you guys so much for adding all of this. One last story I'll tell that is not mine, but my teacher's is just that she worked. She's a meditation teacher, and she worked for some time with uh, 14 to 17-year-olds who were in like juvie jail, prison, with mindfulness and meditation. And she tells this great story of like one of the guys she was working with who was in there for anger and violence issues, and um, was really excited to come to her this one day and be like, "Oh my gosh, I get it. Like I get mindfulness. I had this moment where this guy pissed me off, and I went to punch him, and it was like in the moment of pulling his arm back to punch, he realized what he was doing, and he had a moment of like, whoa, if I punch this dude, I might go back to juvie." And just decided not to. Maybe didn't, you know, um, let go of the anger right away or have a perfect response, but decided to not follow through with the punch. Yeah, we have a lot. Every moment we have these opportunities to either slow down or be with, or when we do have the time to really meditate and investigate, sometimes we can even unravel like really old patterns that are creating our behavior all the way back from childhood. Yeah, I'm happy to share more about myself, and I really want to leave this space open for specific comments or questions you all might have. Um, so, the kind of meditation we just did is considered meditation, mindfulness of the breath, specifically, and a little bit mindfulness of the body, you could say. So, what type of meditation I do started and starts there often every day. I start with some kind of body scan and orienting around the breath and settling, gathering the body. Um, and then it depends, kind of depends on what is needed with what's going on. But I do a lot of what we just did. There is a bigger umbrella term called Vipassana, which just means insight meditation. That is most of what I've been trained in as well. So that is a um, considered a Theravada lineage, and it's the practice of moment by moment by moment, knowing what is happening now. And there are other kinds I've done, but to not convolute the conversation. How often and how long? I meditate every day, every morning. One of the first things I do when I wake up for about 30 to 45 minutes. And I meditate as I'm going to bed every night. Last thing I do in bed, even as I'm laying there. Um, so sometimes that's brief because I fall asleep. And sometimes it's longer. That's when I'm in daily life. And if I'm in more of like an intentionally holding more practice in my daily life, it might be one or two other times throughout the day, or just a longer morning practice connected to like an exercise, breath work. Who already had any kind of meditation practice or has maybe played with any of the apps um, and had a guided meditation before? Carrie, nice. Wow. And as most everyone else, this is a first sort of taste test or a first dive into a full sit. Beautiful. How has mindfulness changed me? Um, so many ways, mostly what I shared, that ability to like interrupt, interrupt habit energy, habit patterns, and be able to actually see the processes happening and choose what I want or what is healthier, what is going to lead more to peaceful outcomes or safe, positive outcomes. And I would say resiliency, also the ability to be with a lot of different emotions, a lot of different experience, and not push it away or run away from it and try to cover it up with distraction and feeling good. It's creative resiliency for being with, yeah, both the big, big joys and the big, big sorrows. Okay, yeah. What are common struggles people find during meditation? What are some tips for realigning your mindfulness? Great question. Love it. Yeah, I think we're all wired a little differently, but the really common struggles are what the Buddha calls the hindrances. So there's restlessness. That is where we often feel like we just want to get up and do something. There is doubt, which is where the mind's like, what is this? Why are we doing this? What's the point? This will never work for me. I can't do this. There is sleepiness, tiredness, or laziness. I don't love that word as much, but yeah, just kind of a feeling of like, whenever I meditate, I feel really close to falling asleep. And then it's always like just ultra relaxing, and then not much else happens. Um, and greed and hatred, the feelings of um, either wanting to pull toward us that which makes us feel better and feels good and yummy and more, or that desire to push away and not be with and be like, I can't feel that. I can't look at that. I don't want it. Um, so those are all five. And then I think people usually kind of have something they major in, right? So whenever you plop down to meditate, uh, do you lean more towards like, I want to get up and do something? My mind is just like, or more toward like, oh, now I just want to like zonk out. I personally have a lot of doubt, honestly, still. I notice it. I notice how subtle and powerful it can be, even when I've had experiences where I'm like, wow, mindfulness and meditation has radically changed my life over and over again. I can be sitting there like, can I really do this? There can be thoughts of, or I'm just phoning it in, or I'm only doing it halfway. I think some of those energies get in my way the most. I'd be curious as I list those if people are like, oh, I have this one, or this is what came up for me. And that's not to say that there's anything bad about any of those. It's actually just what happens. Very common. And to realign, I think just knowing that, and then there are antidotes to each one. Like, okay, if you lean more toward restlessness or sleepiness, there are ways to work with both. Um, that if there was a specific one you wanted me to mention, I could. And I also think finding what creates a sense of like wellness for yourself, so that meditation doesn't feel like one of these self-help things that's like gotta go do that hard thing. It's sort of like exercise. If you hate running on a treadmill, then you're not really probably going to go do it. So why pick that, right? So finding what creates a sense of pleasure, a sense of like, oh, this brings me connection to myself, or this is my little time of day where I feel um, quiet and free, or yeah. So I think the antidotes to those very human and always coming hindrances, and then finding what makes it feel like yours and something you would want to do. What's your favorite or preferred meditation exercise to do? Hmm. I think lately mindfulness of the body. I've really loved like that is we did a little bit in the 10 minutes I guided where we were noticing where there's pockets of tension and inviting relaxation or release. Like you could also do a whole sit where you really scan from head to toe the whole body and bring awareness to areas that have tension, but also bringing awareness to areas that feel good and that feel healthy. It's like we want to build both muscles. We want to build the ability to be with what's difficult, and we want to build the ability to be with what's wonderful. which I think can easily be forgotten. At my school, there's an after school program called Mindful Connections where they meet mentors with students and they talk about emotions. Amazing. Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious also if there's any of the hindrances anyone wants to be like, I know this one, or around emotions. I also think sometimes mindful connections. Sometimes we don't even have a lot of understanding of our emotions, and this can help us get in touch, right? I think for me, I felt like I had maybe three emotions, um, and the more practice I do, I'm like, oh, there's like endless kind of nuanced and subtle different types of emotions. It's not just like happy, angry, sad. That's really cool, Amina. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and then Debbie's adding, fascinated by the studies that show that schools that set aside time for students to meditate find lower violence, bullying, absenteeism, and higher test scores. Does anyone have meditation at their school? Oh, and I see Amina's responding to that. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think as we become more willing to be with what's difficult in our own experience, the more humanizing that is to recognize what's difficult with other people. And that is never to say to make it okay and be like, oh, they're suffering and so they bullied, or they're suffering and so they were violent. But the more we see where we too have the capacity to get angry and do something that we wish we hadn't, and really kind of eyes on your own paper. I had a teacher say that to me once, right? It's like, just take care of this, this garden that I can tend to and water and take care of. Um, yeah, as human beings, we all have the ability to have profound compassion and the ability to have violence. And so learning what leads to compassionate lives and actions and what leads to violent actions and choices, and then choosing the compassionate ones. Sometimes it's very accidental. Um, so it makes a lot of sense to me that those would be the statistics, Debbie, that when we become aware of our own needs and self care, for lack of a better word, then that's going to ripple out, right? And when we're kind of like in that rushing, my favorite songs has a lyric that just says, rushing is violence. Yeah, when we're rushing or we feel a lot of pressure, we feel a lot of negative external forces, it can lead to violent responses, even if that's not like actual literal physical violence, even just violence in our speech or in our decision making and what we end up going into as a career. There are careers that you might not be the one doing the violence, but the whole industry is violent toward the earth or toward certain humans. Yeah. Well, to end on a more compassionate note than that one, I will read this final poem. This is from a book of poems about the first awakened women. So it's all of the women during the Buddha's time who woke up fully, which was not the norm. Um, and they each have a personal story. They're short. I'll read this. This one is called The Elephant. While walking along the river after a long day meditating on Vulture Peak, I watched an elephant splashing its way out of the water and up the bank. Hello, my friend, a man waiting there said, scratching the elephant behind its ear. Did you have a good bath? The elephant stretched out its leg. The man climbed up, and the two rode off like that together. Seeing what had once been so wild, now a friend and companion to this good man, I took a seat under the nearest tree and reached out a gentle hand to my own mind. Truly, I thought, this is why I came to the woods. What I love about this poem is this woman in the woods just noticing the choice to befriend her mind. She's comparing the wild elephant in the water, splashing and muddy, to then so tame and so gentle, letting the man climb up and ride the elephant, and relating that to how to be with herself and her own mind. This mind is so wild and going all over the place and sometimes leading us. Like, have you ever had that feeling where you open the fridge and you're like, why am I even in the fridge? I didn't even mean to be in the fridge. So this wild creature of a mind, and learning how to befriend it, learning how to be teammates and collaborators. Okay, this will be recorded if you ever want to watch it back. I also may be back another time for a part two. And I just wish so much rest and peace for everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Debbie, and thank you all for being here.